Hello, everybody, and welcome to the second part of my Qaballistic workshop. And before we begin, I would like to address a couple things. The first, thank you for all of you who have taken the time to sit through this and to offer your comments and discussions. So this video, in the grand scheme of things, part one, it's a very small channel, so to get a couple hundred views is pretty good. For whatever reason, that part one reached a lot more individuals than I expected. So it was very nice to see the comments coming through and the emails and whatnot that I received, and most of them were positive, which is also something I appreciate. So thank you. And when I say positive, I mean they weren't attacking or going into places they shouldn't when, you have these types of videos who are religious people or people with a different philosophical bend. Will let you know what they think in not so nice terms. So I appreciate that. Second, there was a common remark that was made that I'd like to address. And that was, so my assertion is that Western esotericism stems from Qabalah, Gnosticism, and alchemy, and that each of those stems from a different thread of the Abrahamic faith. Being Gnosticism is a portion of Christianity, it's mystic Christianity. Kabbalah's mystic Judaism, and alchemy was mystic Islam, Sufism. And I was corrected on that, and the correction was, it's actually all this stems from Egypt, not those three things I mentioned, and that is technically true. Everything does stem from Egypt and likely beyond, before Egypt. Someone taught the Egyptians. From my perspective, just to put this into context, Western esotericism derives from those three things: Sufism, Judaism, Christianity, in a more direct route. But yes, before those, we go beyond that into the Babylonian, Chaldean, Sumerian, Egyptian. You can get lost into those rabbit holes. And yes, that stuff does stem. The stuff we're talking about today does ultimately stem from those mysteries. Once you get to Pythagoras, things get really murky, and it's really hard to find any actual texts that you can use to talk about the mysteries, because a lot of those mysteries were oral, so they were mouth to ear. And being mouth to ear, there was nothing written, and very little survives. I'm not saying nothing survives, but finding those works and being able to use them as reference is extraordinarily difficult. So I wanted to put that context into place. I absolutely agree that the mysteries do stem from Egypt, but I wanted to give my context as to where I was coming from. But thank you for leaving those comments. Now, today, my friends, is where the rubber hits the road, as they say. This is where we actually start to do some work. And I'm going to go over two main things in part two here. And it's probably going to be a little bit lengthy, so you may have to take this video in a couple pieces, and that's fine. But when we begin the Qabalah, the two things we're going to talk about today is the Hebrew alphabet and the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram. And so your job, if you're seriously trying to apply this workshop, will be to focus on these two things for the next month or so. And the frequency of these videos will probably be every 3 weeks to a month, or maybe 5 weeks. It's going to be in that 3 to 5 week span. It's not meant to be shotgunned. It's not meant to be a fire hose of information all at once. We do have to spend some time reflecting on these items. So that's what you can expect from a volume perspective out of me. Now we're going to start with the Hebrew alphabet. And when we start with the Hebrew alphabet and also with the lesser banishing ritual, the pentagram, be aware that most mystery schools I know of or am a part of begin in the same area. So this is where we are also beginning. This is neophyte grade work. This is stuff you would have to know before you even go into a mystery school, a modern mystery school. And again, the rubber hits the road. There's a lot of work to do here, but we're going to go over how you can accomplish this without it being overwhelming and scary. All right, so the first thing you're going to have to do is you're going to have to learn the Hebrew alphabet. The Hebrew alphabet has 22 letters. The Qabalah has 22 paths. Each of the paths of the Qabalah is associated with the Hebrew letter. Important to know, and I've mentioned this in other videos, to include the history of Western esotericism and the history of Qabalah, there is no one unified tree. There is no tree that rules them all in terms of all paths will have this Hebrew letter. Like all of this path is this Hebrew letter. That is not a thing. It is my firm belief that you create your own Qabalah and that you will associate your own letters. But we're going to be looking at some examples created by rabbis, prophets, or who are considered prophets, and the Golden Dawns Association. And these are good starting points. So there are 22 paths, 22 letters. Biblical Hebrew, which is what we're going to be using, has no vowels. Everything is a consonant, which means its pronunciation can be a mystery, and that's very true when we get into a lot of things. The actual pronunciation of a Hebrew word in biblical terms was kind of veiled by the fact that there were no vowels in there. Hebrew's written from right to left, so every time we look at Hebrew words, you start from the right and you work your way over. It composes of 3 mother letters, and those mother letters are Aleph, Mem, and Shin, which we can see up here. Let's see if I can make my laser pointer. Here we are, laser pointer. All right, cool. So Aleph, Mem, and Shin are the 3 mother letters. We have 7 double letters that are right here. That's Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Kaf, Peh, Resh, and Tau. Okay. The rest are called simple letters, though I've also heard them called elemental letters. And these are those. Now, each of these letters has representations in the esoteric schools, as shown by the various symbology shown here on this slide. So you can take a screenshot of this slide for your notes or draw it into your journal. The 7 double letters apply themselves to the 7 planets, the 7 classical planets, and the 12 simple letters apply themselves to the 12 signs of the zodiac, which also apply to the 12 tribes of Israel. The 3 mother letters relate to air, which is Aleph, fire, which is Shin, and water, which is Mem. All right, so now we look at why are we looking at why is Hebrew so important? Why do we care? And you will find different esoterics use different alphabets, different languages. I know people who do this work in Egyptian. I know people who do this work in Greek. You can do it in Latin. You're going to do a lot of this in English, probably, if you're an English speaker. If you speak other languages, you can use your other languages. The thing is, ultimately, resonance, which is one of the 7 liberal arts, resonance is the most important aspect. The human body is an instrument tuned to resonance. Now we have what's called the original language. The original language has no name. They say that it was more abstract and it was based around resonance. And the Tower of Babel story, in which this picture right here is an engraving or an image of the Tower of Babel, I also have this in my house, is an allegory for the loss of that one language and ultimately, the world split into its native languages, which split humanity into basically factions that are all against each other, which was the point of removing that unified language. Now, esoteric tradition informs us that the Hebrew alphabet is the closest language and alphabet that conforms to that original language. And the Hebrew language is based upon a Phoenician alphabet before it, and biblical Hebrew is not the first version of Hebrew. There were versions of the Hebrew alphabet before that, which you could study on your own. We are working specifically with the Hebrew alphabet. Now, the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, what you are expected to know. You need to be able to identify all 22 letters, and if they have final forms, which is what some of these letters have a second character, those are final forms, right? So Kaf has final form, Mem has a final form, Pe has a final form, Nun has a final form, and Zadi has a final form. Those 5. You should be able to go when you are done with your studies on this. You should be able to look at random any of these letters and identify what it is, identify its numeric value, identify how it sounds, and optionally what major tarot arcana card is associated with it. That's more of a recent thing that was brought into form by Eliphas Levi and then Pappus and applied to the Martinist order, but Golden Dawn also did it. This is considered a standard practice today in a lot of orders. I will make this point out to you. The 22 paths associating with the Hebrew letters associating with the tarot is not accepted by everyone. There were esoteric adepts who vehemently disagreed that that was a real thing and that it was just nonsense, fantastical nonsense. Waite, who created the Rider-Waite cards, was one of those opponents of using tarot for Qabalah, and he writes extensively how stupid that was. So I point that out because it's not a unified theory. It's a widely accepted theory, but widely accepted does not mean that you should just take that for granted. So keep that in mind. I do use this. I find a lot of use to it. It's more of a symbolical thing that helps me understand what the cards are trying to convey, what the path is trying to convey. But ultimately, I don't believe it's necessary. So take this with a grain of salt. But this part, what's on this slide, is absolutely necessary. Okay. Now, these numbers here, this is the gematria of the value of the letter. This is important to note. This one got me for a few years, my friends. So Kaf is the first letter with a final. Now, when I say final, what that means is if the letter K was at the end of a word, it would not use the traditional Kaf letter. It would use its final letter, right? That's what final form means. Final form means that this letter is found at the end of a word. And 5 of those letters will not use their normal hieroglyph. They will use a final version of themselves. Now, in the Golden Dawn's gematria, they chose to use Mispar Gadol, which assigns a different numeric value to a final letter. Okay, so the letter K for Kaf, the letter K can be the number 20, but if it's found at the end of a word, it would be the number 500. Now, what threw me off? Well, if you look at the bottom of the slide here, standard gematria, which is Mispar Hechraki, I'm probably mispronouncing those, and I apologize, but I'm getting them as close as I can. Mispar Hechraki does not use final form letters with different numbers, indicating that version of gematria, Kaf would always be the number 20, no matter if it's the normal version or the final version. And that used to drive me crazy because as I would read text and they would be going, well, this word's geometrical value is the number 412. And I would go, cool. And so I would practice what I learned, and the numbers would never add up because I was using the Golden Dawn version where the finals were in play. And a lot of the text, it's called standard for a reason, because most of the texts that I've read don't use the Golden Dawn version of Gematria. They use the standard. So the final letters were the same as the normal letters. And that's why my calculations were always off. Which means if Gematria is being used to encode something, you have to know which version of Gematria was used. And there are like 9. You can research this on your own. Just Google up the various gematria forms or whatever, get creative. But there are articles written on all 9 of them and how you calculate them. I have found 3 in practice. I have found standard, Golden Dawn, and another one that was used. It was like used once. So most of them aren't used very often, if at all, but they exist, and you need to be aware of that. For the purpose of what we're doing here, we're going to learn the Golden Dawn version, but just keep in mind that you may just use the standard version if you're trying to decipher something, and more than likely it's probably using the standard version. So you're going to want to screenshot that last slide, and I'll show it one more time, because this is one of your assignments. And you're going to look at that and be like, that's a lot of work. Yeah, the neophyte grade, any of the grades are a lot of work. But this is a beginning, right? So this isn't something that's just handed to you. There's some work involved. So it's kind of cool that you might get to kind of learn a new language, right? This was in Jean Dubois' work on this chapter. He also showed the Egyptian hieroglyphs associated with the Hebrew characters. This is useful for screenshot purposes, but other than that, it may not be super useful unless you're starting to get into much later in your career having to decipher Egyptian hieroglyphs and translating that into Hebrew. All right. So looking at the Hebrew letters themselves, Hebrew letters have multiple meanings, not just the letter like what we know in English, like the letter A is ah, the letter D is duh, right? And that's the extent of what we use in English. Hebrew letters have multiple ways of encoding information. So, for example, it will have a name. So what you're seeing on screen is Aleph, and we know it is a mother letter, so you should be able to know that this is a mother letter, a double letter, or a single letter. It will have a geometric value, or a geometric value. I switch back and forth between the pronunciation of that. Aleph is the number 1 in Hebrew, so it represents the number 1. It will have a way you pronounce it. Aleph happens to not have a pronunciation. It is a silent letter. There are 2 silent letters in the Hebrew alphabet. Remembering again that the Hebrew alphabet is consonants. There are no vowels. The tarot association with the Hebrew letter Aleph is the Fool, key 0. And this one's pretty easy. It's just offset by 1. So tarot starts with 0. The letters start with 1. But 0 is the first tarot card. 1 is the first Hebrew letter. Therefore, they are related. Bet is the second Hebrew letter, and therefore its association, if 0 was associated with Aleph, then key 1 would be associated with Bet, and that is the magician, and so on and so forth. So that is how you find that. They're not scrambled up or anything. They're in linear order. Each of these letters has an esoteric meaning. And in this case, Aleph's common esoteric meaning is the ox and the yoke, which means when you look at a letter, when you look at a word and it's composed of Hebrew letters, not only is it the word, it is its numeric value, which is the sum of all of its letters, and it is a combination of the esoteric meaning of the words. So this is how people get associations out of Hebrew words. Letters have an outward appearance, which is how you view it. It has how it's spoken on the tongue, or the outer part of the tongue, which is its resonance. And it has a secret meaning at the back of the tongue, which is its gematria. So the Hebrew letters are packed with information. And one of the things you have to do is kind of retrain your mind to viewing things not just as a literal word, not as the exoteric way it's handed to you. Same thing if you're going through Freemasonry or any other order, you will be given an exoteric meaning of something, which is the words, and then there is symbolic meaning, which is the actual what the person's trying to convey. Another thing I like, another metaphor, as it were. The exoteric meaning is the envelope that the message is contained in. The message inside is its esoteric. So if you're just reading the envelope's contents on the outside and discarding it, that's all you're getting out of things in life. There are two methods of study according to Jean Dubois. The first method of study of Hebrew is to study each letter one after the other in depth. That's actually what I did. And the second is to study the alphabet in its entirety and deepen your understanding of each letter by graduations, a little at a time. This is what Jean Dubois did, and this is what I will be doing in this course. So don't panic when you see 22 letters and how are you going to possibly learn all of that. You will. You'll learn it. You'll look back on it and be like, oh, it wasn't as bad as I thought. But we're going to be going all of the letters and then starting to learn about a little bit of them as we go on. So we don't have to, don't freak out. And that's kind of probably why he chose that method. It might be a better teaching way than the way I did, which was to spend a ton of time on each letter until I was proficient in each one of them. And either one of those works. So coming at the end of part one of the video, homework and guides. These are things I recommend. Right here, this is an Amazon image of the flashcards that I use to memorize the alphabet. Pay attention to this deck of cards also has cards that I did not use. Mainly the dagishes at the top here, the vowels, etc. That had nothing to do with what I was studying, so I discarded those. And we're just focusing on the letters. So what I did here is in wet erase marker, I wrote how it sounded. Like there's already some information on here, like how it's pronounced. But I also wrote like the tarot associations and whatnot. And then I drew. And then what I did was I went 5 at a time. So I picked the first 5 and I studied the first 5. And then I would rotate through the cards and randomize them until I could just pull 5 of them at random and then know all of them and all the information on the back. And then I'd add the next 5. And that's how I went through until I did all 22. So you want to memorize the 22 letters, memorize their sounds, memorize their numbers, research some of their esoteric meanings for your journal and note them down. They recommend that each page of your journal is dedicated to a single letter. And then optional, I have memorized each major tarot key. A book that you might find enjoyable is the Book of Tokens here, Tarot Meditations, because this is by Paul Foster Case. This book associates each letter with the tarot card that's appropriate and gives some meditations on that. And for me, that book has been really, really cool. I'm in Boda, so that's part of what we do in Boda. But it was an awesome study. And neither of those two things are very expensive. So that's what I recommend, and that's your homework. That's first part of your homework. Now we're going to get into the second part of this video, which is which will be another piece of homework for you. And this is a staple of most Western orders today. You will see this everywhere. And that is the Lesser Banishing Rite of the Pentagram. This was made famous by the Golden Dawn. The LBRP, which is what you will usually call it, should be done prior to any work you do. Any work you do. You should do this at least once a day, morning or night, whatever you feel is best. You should do this once a day for your own general benefit, and you should do this before you do any work. Now, there are many ways to banish negative, icky stuff attached to you. The LBRP is a standard way. There are other ways. I don't care what way you choose to use. You can use whatever is the best, most comfortable way for you. I am going to call out a few things here right now. This is a very important part. So if your eyes are glazed over for most of my video here, this is the part where you need to unglaze and pay attention. And the LBRP consists of two movements. The first is the Qaballistic Cross. The second is the actual LBRP itself. The first thing I have here is always research any words you speak. Always understand all the movements you're going to do. And I've underlined in orange this is not a toy. This is the part where I want to get into in a little aside for you. This is not a toy. If you think it's a toy and you mess around with things better left alone, it does have negative impact in your life. I have watched this many times. I've been involved in this stuff for over 30 years. I have watched people's failures and have learned from them because some of them were pretty catastrophic. Never recite any words you do not understand. If someone gives you a book and you start quoting out of the book or reading out of the book or vocalizing out of the book and you have no idea what you're saying, well, as they say, you're going to have a bad time. I am going to break down the LBRP for you and what all these words mean. Anytime you have to learn something new, you should always, first thing, identify what these words are and what they actually mean. Second, with movements, ritual movements. If you go to a Catholic church, you go to a Pentecostal church, you go to any type of church, you're going to see ritual involved. They don't call it that a lot of times, but it's the same thing. When you're singing hymns, that's resonance. When you're doing all the motions, and if I spent 5 years in an evangelical church, and they did a lot of motions. They did circumambulations. It's all the same thing. Always understand what it is you're doing, and when you're doing a motion, don't just say, if I tell you, do this, and you just copy me, but you don't know why, and I'm not telling you why, that should fire a red flag off for you. Last one, I say this is not a toy. The LBRP's purpose is to cleanse us of any negative energy stuck to us, which we will accumulate through the course of the day just living, right? It also protects you when you're doing ritual. You light up like a beacon, and things see this. You don't want to let those things ride you. Now, I'm going to go off on an aside. I've met a lot of people in my life who claim to be adepts. Now, an adept is basically a master, right? They're not a master, but they've graduated from the initiate phase, and they're practically working in things. There are very few adepts in the world, and very few true adepts in the world. There are a number of people that think they are, or claim they are, or may have attained some special degree, so they think they are, but they're not adepts at all. And they're dangerous because of this. They're dangerous to themselves, and they're dangerous to other people. People chase titles. People chase degrees. That's the unfortunate truth of man. Why I always say Freemasonry is such a great treasure, one of the things is that it prepares you for stuff, not explicitly. Most Freemasons will call this garbage that I'm talking about right here and has nothing to do with Freemasonry. And they're 90% correct. Qabalah is baked into the Freemasonic ritual because there's a lot of Hermetic symbolism that exists that they don't even realize because they don't study this stuff or care. But right, when we go into a Freemasonic lodge, we're not doing Qabalah and stuff like that. It's not explicit. Freemasonry gives us tools for life. The very first degree of Freemasonry is about controlling your emotions and your passions and your desires. And that is the most difficult of the 3 degrees. In fact, the greatest disappointment you will find amongst Freemasons, especially esoteric, is that a lot of their brothers don't curb their passions and desires. And they're chasing degrees, they're chasing leadership positions, they're chasing prestige and status. That's everywhere. That's not just Freemasonry, that's everywhere. It's in anything that involves people, politics, or any organization. It's all about control, right? There's always going to be someone in there that's important. That doesn't mean that the whole organization is what that person is making it. If you cannot control your emotions, you are not an adept. I have been involved in this work for over 30 years, and I am an initiate still. I could claim to be an adept because I've been exposed to the teachings, but I'm not. And the reason I have personally held myself back from being an adept, from wanting to proceed, because I have my own trauma that I deal with. And because I have my own trauma that I deal with, that means I have emotional triggers that I still have not overcome. I still get triggered emotionally. I can still lose my temper. And those things will hurt you if you cannot manage them. Now, it is and this is again an aside, it is my personal belief that most people are never going to overcome their trauma, because trauma is a physical change to your body. Trauma physically alters your neurology, and you cannot just go in there and there's no mechanic that can go in there and rewire your neurology. Now, there are ways to do it. It's very difficult. So I'm not saying it's impossible, and I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm saying most people who claim to have overcome their trauma have not. You manage it. You learn how to manage your trauma. And because of that, because I still have triggers, I have held myself back. I am not an adept because I know it's dangerous to try to assume that I am. Okay. So how do you know if you're an adept or not? Well, why does this matter? Because I've met a lot of people who claim to be adepts, who teach people, and are sending them down the dark path, a bad path. They may not be doing it on purpose, but it's not good. You will hear people say you don't need the LBRP. You can just do it in your head. And technically that's true. Adepts can do that because they've mastered themselves. They can do that because we are all shards of the divine. We are all shards of God. We are all part of God. We are ascending. That's the whole point of Qabalah, is to ascend back to God. So we have that power. We have the power over any of the little shady, shadowy things that may try to screw with us. But most of us are not in a position to overcome those without aid. And so when you claim to be able to do the LBRP in your head and you're not an adept, you are putting yourself in a bad position, and you're putting other people who are listening to you in a bad position, who think that they don't have to do the work or what have you. Because that's honestly what it comes down to, is they just don't want to have to do the work. How do you know that you're not ready to be an adept? How do you know that you shouldn't be doing the LBRP in your head? If you get triggered emotionally by anything, you're not ready. If you are constantly looking around in the shadows for the nefarious, if you're looking at every individual around you for the negative stuff and how they're trying to screw you over, you shouldn't be doing the LBRP in your head. You're not an adept for sure. If you're looking, if you need to be in control, if you need to be in power, if you get upset when you're not in power and someone else was chosen instead of you, you're not an adept. You're not in control of your desires. You're letting your desires control you. Okay. Those are very easy, and you can spot that in someone within 5 minutes of talking to them if you pay attention. Pay attention. Second, we learn to use our minds. That involves study. We should be studying something. People who don't want to read or study, those are not adepts, in my opinion. Last, you have to have the courage to stand up for what you believe in and not be afraid to die for what you believe in. And most people, most people don't get tested on that to know would you be willing to die for your beliefs, because we live in a pretty safe world. Well, up until recently anyway. The world's getting crazy, but those things, if you can, and those are the things we learn in Freemasonry. If you can do those things, you're ready to move on. If you have trauma just straps itself onto you. It's a demon, the trauma demon. And what it does and the easiest way to manipulate men or women is their ego. And that's just that's that need to be in control or be in charge or being upset that you didn't get chosen. That's the trauma demon. The trauma demon saying, you should have been chosen. You are ready. You are the best. That person's a sham artist. He's a fraud. The only reason he got that is because he made shady deals in the back through his connections or whatever. If you rely on emotional arguments instead of rational arguments, meaning you're not providing evidence for the things that you're mad about, you're just guessing because you quote unquote know, you have a long way to go still. Okay. And most people are this, and that's fine. You're human. you want to overcome that. That's what you're trying to overcome. So that little aside, this is not a toy. Pay attention to these things. I am not going to perform this ritual for you. I'm going to go over the words and what they mean, and I am going to provide a link in this video to what I consider the best version of someone performing this for your benefit. Now, as I stated before, the LBRP is consisted of the Qaballistic Cross and the LBRP itself. These things should be noted in your journal. The Qaballistic Cross is used to equalize the elements within you, to center you, and to consecrate a sacred space for your work. That's why we begin and end everything with this right here. And here's a graphical illustration of what you're creating. You will face the east. Most everything we do starts with facing the east. You will raise your finger, your implement of your right hand, and you'll point up above your head at your crown, and you're going to what's called vibrate, ata, which means thou art. Vibration is a key piece of ritual. You do it if you sat in a choir in church, you vibrated. It's singing. We vibrate in the beginning with a monotone note, usually I use the C note. So I'll just do one for you real quick. For ata would be ata, and you let it vibrate. You should feel the vibration. And when I do that, I feel there's a power, there's a resonance that goes and runs through my head. Okay, that's vibration. This is where people kind of feel self-conscious because they feel it's stupid. But if you sang hymns in church, you're resonating, you're vibrating. It's the same concept used for the same thing. Once you point at your head and vibrate ata, thou art, you're going to point down to your feet. In a black circle, you're going to envision at the base of your feet. And you're going to feel this line draw through your body. You're going to visualize it. And you're going to vibrate malkuth, which means the kingdom. You're then going to extend your right arm out like we have in this image, and you're going to point to your right and visualize a red line shooting out into infinity. And you're going to vibrate gibura, which means strength or power. You're then going to point to your left shoulder. You're going to point your finger, and a line is going to extend out your left shoulder. It's going to be blue. And you're going to vibrate gidula, which means glory. You then clasp your hands at the center of the chest, fingers pointing out, and you're going to vibrate Leolam, Amen, which means forever, Amen. And in Hebrew, what you have said is, thou art the kingdom, the power, the glory, forever, Amen, which you might recognize as a prayer from the Bible. All right, so that's the Qaballistic Cross. It's the first and last thing you do. Now let's tear apart the LBRP, because I said, don't do anything unless you understand what's going on. Don't just do it to mimic it or parrot it. At best, nothing's going to happen because you don't know what's going on. At worst, you're doing something that you shouldn't be doing. Okay. Now, here's some rules. Take note. Number one, we talk about banishing pentagrams and invoking pentagrams, and then the number one question is, well, what determines that something is a banishing pentagram of earth? Okay, the LBRP is the banishing pentagram of earth. Well, that's because I believe it was Cornelius Agrippa who applied the elements to the 5 points of geometry known as the pentagram, and earth was associated with the lower left-hand point. As such, that is carried over today, and this is still the earth point of the pentacle. Now, when you banish, you're going to start with the element and you're going to push away. Okay? So in this case, if I'm doing a banishing earth pentagram, I'm going to start at my lower left hip and I'm going to push up to my head because I'm pushing away. I'm banishing. If I'm invoking, I'm going to pull towards it. So an invoking earth pentagram, if this is earth, I am going to start at my head and I'm going to pull down towards the earth. Okay, so that means if I'm banishing air, I'm going to start at my left shoulder and push to my right shoulder. All right, or push down to fire. It really depends on how the ritual's described. But these are the 5 elements and the 5 Neoplatonic solids that are associated with those elements. These are also called Pythagorean solids, These are detailed in the Timaeus by Plato. I highly recommend you make yourself familiar with some of Plato's works because a lot of Western esotericism comes from the Platonics, which are rooted with the Timaeus and the Republic and other such texts. And before Plato, we had Pythagoras, who I consider the wellspring and root of most Western esoterics. Now, the Roman philosopher Boethius defined the concept of what is known as the quadrivium, which is arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. The quadrivium we are familiar with as Freemasons. We're supposed to learn the quadrivium. These used to be, along with what's called the trivium, which is grammar, rhetoric, and logic, was once taught in our academic institutions before our academic institutions became propaganda machines just to teach people how to obey. The quadrivium is a driving force of the cosmos according to the Platonics. Everything is based around mathematics and numbers. And as I mentioned before, it was Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa who perpetuated the pentagram as a magical symbol and assigned its 5 points. Now, my last pointer here is the inverted pentagram. Most people think of today as an evil pentagram of Satan. Okay, so that came from Levi in 1853 or whenever he wrote that. He associates the upside-down pentagram with dark forces, and then a dude named Anton LaVey created the Satanic Church in the 1960s and used that as his symbol. The inverted pentagram, well, any symbol can be whatever you want it to be, really. We have lots of symbols that have been appropriated over the past 100 years. We've had a lot of ancient and divine symbols that have been turned into evil by funny Austrian men with mustaches, people who believe that one race is superior than the other, so abducted Nordic runes and traditions, and Anton LaVey being Anton LaVey and the edgelord that he was. The inverted pentagram has many meanings, and it is not, to me, a symbol of darkness and evil. It does symbolize spirit descending into matter, but that is the whole half of the Qabalah. It's the whole point of that. So it does have various meanings. One thing you can do is go look up what some of those meanings are that has nothing to do with Goatman. So anyhow, that is the anatomy of the LBRP. That kind of tells you what the pentagram is all about. It's a piece of geometry that was part of Pythagorean mysteries and has evolved over the past couple thousand years. The next thing we're going to talk about is movements, and that is clockwise versus counterclockwise movements in esoteric traditions. We call clockwise movements Diosil and counterclockwise motions Widdershins. When you're moving in a clockwise manner, you are moving with the sun, and this is said to be used to invoke and provide a mechanism of growth and manifestation. So you're bringing something into being when you move in a clockwise manner. Counter to that is when you move in a counterclockwise manner, which is Widdershins, in which case you're going against the sun, you are cleansing, you are banishing, and you are ending something. Now this is important because the LBRP, and this threw me for years as well, the LBRP, as you're going to see, you move in a clockwise motion. You're going to move Diosil from east to south to west to north back to east. And yet it's called a banishing ritual. It is a banishing ritual that you move clockwise. And so the common question I had, and a common question that is asked to me today, is why is it called a banishing ritual if you move clockwise? And that is because in its standard form, the LBRP is not a banishing ritual. Technically, it is an invoke. You invoke archangels to cleanse your space, and the outward result is a banishing of the negativity, but you're still invoking the archangels. So what you will see is that some versions of the LBRP, they will have changed it where they're going counterclockwise, and because it feels right to them, because now they're banishing. To me, that's broken because you're going to be invoking archangels, but moving counterclockwise, which is kind of repulsing the archangels. But I am not the authority on everything. I am an initiate. So if it feels right for you to do that, by all means, do it. If it's actually doing what you feel it should be doing, there is no arbitrator of how to do something. Okay. Someone somewhere decided moving Deosil was invoke and counterclockwise is banishment. You do what you feel is right. In my personal opinion, being a divine shard as we are, everything's coming from up here anyway. And this is why technically you can do the LBRP in your mind and not have to do any motions. The motions help you focus your mind. It's like why we wear ritual garb or why we use implements. You don't need any of those things. I could be in this, what I'm wearing now, and things will work just fine. It helps tune your mind to the proper frequency. It gets you ready, like wearing a uniform. All right. Now the banishing and invoking pentagrams. This is just showing you again. You're going to be doing in the LBRP this banishing right here. And to banish, you're gonna start at your left hip. You're going to draw and you're going to imagine a blue-white flame being drawn up to your head, down to your right hip, over to your left shoulder, across to your right shoulder, and closing back at your left hip. That is the banishing ritual, or that is the banishing pentagram of earth. As a neophyte, that's pretty much all you should be doing at this point. Those are the motions. Now, part of the LBRP is you're going to invoke 4 archangels. You're invoking beings. Now, here's some notes on archangels. Finding information on these can be tricky. A lot of this stuff is found in ancient Hebrew texts, and I may have some study guides on these later to help you. In fact, I believe I do at the end of this. But know what entities you're invoking as well. Here's the thing with archangels. They're not always your friend. In fact, archangels don't necessarily like humans at all. It is a part of myth and legend that 2 whole hosts of angels were destroyed by God for arguing with him for creating archangels. The first were Azazel's angels, who were cast down to the earth. You might know Azazel today as the fallen, the chief fallen angel. Whether he is Satan or not, I can't say, because Satan, I believe, has a job that's given by God to test humans. Satan is the opposer, or the enemy. But Azazel was the name of the first fallen angel, the leader of the fallen angels, and he is depicted in the books of Enoch. The second archangel was Michael, and his host was consumed by divine fire for arguing against him for creating men. The third host was Raphael's, and Raphael was smart enough to go, yeah, we saw what happened to the last 2 hosts. Let's not argue with God on this. So they begrudgingly kept their mouth shut. But archangels aren't necessarily humanity's friends. They serve God. And as long as you're serving God and going along with God's will, they are your allies. But don't serve God, go against what he wants, and they are your greatest enemies. So keep that in mind. People have this idea in their head that the archangels will always be their friends. The archangels serve God. Not to all of them, but you to a lot of them, they're jealous of you, of what we are, and they don't even see the need for us even being here. We're going to go over the 4 cardinal archangels. Now, the archangels themselves are also called the Lords of Flame, and we'll get into what that means here in a second. The cardinal archangels you'll be invoking are Raphael to the east, and I'm going to use he for these mostly, but archangels have no gender. They are both genders, both male and female, and can manifest however you wish them. They're also not humanoid or look like humans in their real forms. They are creatures out of an H.P. Lovecraft novel. We'll just go with that. Raphael means God's healing and is associated with the element of air. Michael, or Michael, in the south, who is like God. He is the solar angel, and he is associated with the element of fire. Gabriel, in the west, is the strength of God. She is associated with the moon and the element of water. And Uriel, in the north, the light of God, is associated with the element of the earth. Now, the Lords of Flame. I'm gonna pull this slide has a whole bunch of stuff on here. I'm gonna briefly go over it. The Lords of Flame, as far as I'm concerned, are a theosophical, we'll call it an invention. It's a name that was given. I first heard of it in Dion Fortune's works, The Cosmic Doctrine. Since then, in studying theosophy, you'll find it in Blavatsky's writings as well. The lords of flame are archangels. They began their work when it was just God and them. And in the cosmic doctrine, God is the solar logos, or the sun. Theosophy states that the lords of flame were advanced beings incarnated into human form during what is known as the third root race of humanity. We in our state now are currently the fifth root race of humanity according to Theosophy. Theosophy itself is heavily rooted in Eastern esotericism, and much of today's New Age esoteric orders pull heavily from it. So the Theosophy was like a bridge to the west of the Eastern philosophies. The Lords of Flame are also known as, and I'm going to get these wrong, the Agni-Shivatas, or solar angels, and also known as the children of the fire mist, and were all considered adepts. They were considered temporary and returned back to Venus. So again, this is the New Age starseed type thought. They originated in Venus. States that the Lords of Flame came from Venus, and there were 105 of them traveling within what was known as a cloud of fire, and established what is called the Great White Brotherhood, which has nothing to do with the color of anyone's skin. Just double underline that last section for you. The Great White Brotherhood has nothing to do with white people. This is being talked about by people from India who are most definitely not white. And initiated the spiritual and evolutionary development of humanity and Gaia. They landed on what was called White Island, again, has nothing to do with white people, in the Gobi Sea, and established Shambhala. Shambhala is a fascinating myth. I highly recommend you look into it. These Lords of Flame were divided into 3 groups of 35, fulfilling a specific mission assigned by the principles of will, Shiva, wisdom, Vishnu, and activity, the Brahma. Within the secret doctrine, Blavatsky states that there are 2 classes of Lords of Flame: ascended humans, which were like gods in terms like the Olympians, the gods, and the sons of wisdom, which were celestial beings undergoing evolution, which is us today. So we are one step below the ascended humans. The first 2 root races, remember, Lords of Flame started with the third root race according to Theosophy. The first 2 of these were forming before the Lords of Flame came to Earth. 18 million years ago, the third root race developed with the assistance of these beings. That is the brief summary on what a Lord of Flame is, and there's extensive writings that you can look into later, should you wish. I'm just exposing you to the term and where it came from here. Now let us look at the 4 primary archangels in the LBRP. Raphael to the east means God's healing. He is first mentioned in holy texts in the book of Tobit and in 1 Enoch. The names of the archangels were brought to us, or brought by the Jews from Babylon, so these names weren't Hebrew in origin, they were Babylonian. He is the archangel of healing. He is identified as one of the 3 heavenly visitors entertained by Abraham at the Oak of Mamre. I'm going to mispronounce those, according to the Babylonian Talmud. He is identified as the angel who stirred the waters in the pool of Bethesda in John. He is identified as the unnamed angel in the Quran, 6:7-3, standing with a trumpet ready to announce the day of judgment. His mission is to save people, so he might be a benevolent archangel who cares about people. Again, he was the one, according to holy texts, that watched Azazel himself and his host be cast to earth, and Michael's host consumed by holy fire, so that kind of got him in line. His mission is to save people. According to the Midrash Conan, which is a Hebrew holy text, he was once named Libael. God is my heart, but God changed his name because his host of angels had been rescued by his advice, telling them to shut their mouth when they were going to argue about the creation of man. So God changed his name because of that. Per the Midrash Tanhuma, Satan found a righteous man studying the Torah who would not try to be with another man's wife or any other woman. Satan then took the form of a beautiful woman and tried to seduce him. I'm assuming that this man was married, so Satan tried to get him to go bang him, to cheat on his wife. But the man, seeing that Satan wouldn't take no for an answer, blinded himself so that his base nature would not prevail. Seeing that the man was indeed righteous, God sent Raphael to him to heal his eyes. And the Sefer HaBahir calls Raphael the Prince of Peace. So that is the first archangel we invoke. To our right, to the south, because we're facing east, so to our right is south. It's Michael, one who is like God. He is the solar archangel associated with the sun and the element of fire. He is considered the warrior of God in all three Abrahamic traditions. Interesting, and this is my own side note, though other archangels reside in a position of military form, such as Qamael, which is the archangel of strength, courage, justice, and war. So Michael does not have a monopoly on holding the sword and being God's military arm. There are other archangels that also have those duties. He's often depicted, Michael is, as the chief of the archangels. He was number 2. And then Azazel was number 1, and Azazel got thrown to earth. In Revelations book 12, he does battle with Satan in that, and you can find pictures of him standing over the throat of the dragon. The book of Enoch lists Michael as one of 7 archangels who stand ready to enter before the glory of the Lord. He's very commonly referred to and prayed to in all forms of the Abrahamic faiths and their subsets. In the Apocryphon of John, interestingly enough, Michael controls the demons who help Yaldabaoth create Adam, along with Uriel and 5 other archangels. So it's like they were kind of working as part of God's will, almost. As that is an interesting piece of text there, the secret doctrine of John. He is the patron saint of warriors, and he was the archangel over the second host who were against God creating man, and his host was entirely consumed by fire, as I have noted before. Michael challenges humans to develop higher consciousness and is currently, per Theosophy and Rudolf Steiner, the current Logos influence, and as such is represented by the sign of the Logos, which is the sun. Freemasons are also familiar with that. No, that is found in every Freemasonic lodge. Those are interesting things to think about, especially when you start into the nonsense of Freemasonry being the devil and all that, when all the symbology has everything to do with God and the archangels and things of that nature. The third angel to the west, behind you as you're standing to the east, is Gabriel, the strength of God. Now I note that Gabriel is commonly depicted as a woman. Again, they have no gender. Gabriel can be male, female, or in its true form, which is an H.P. Lovecraft creature. The messenger of God, Gabriel is often in that role, mentioned in all three Abrahamic faiths, and is first referenced during the Second Temple Revival, being the period of time when the Second Temple of Jerusalem stood before it was destroyed finally by the Romans in the year 70. It was during the Second Temple period that the names and ranks of angels and demons were expanded on in literature. And Gabriel's name originated during the Babylonian exile. Again, the Babylonian exile is where the Hebrews received a lot of their inspiration for the Hebraic myth, which indicates that a lot of the stuff is a lot older than Jewish mysticism. This starts going into Babylonian, Assyrian, Sumerian, Egyptian, right? And follow the thread. She appears to Daniel in the book of Daniel. She appears in 1 Enoch and other ancient Hebrew writings. In the Babylonian Talmud, she is said to be the man clothed with linen in Ezekiel. In 1 Enoch, she's one of the 7 archangels to watch the fallen and is one of the 4 archangels alongside Michael, Raphael, and Phanuel, who is also known as Uriel, to cast the fallen angels into the abyss on Judgment Day. Phanuel is the Gnostic name for Uriel. These are the 4 archangels that we invoke during the LBRP. Alongside Michael is the guardian angel of the Israelites. Appears in the New Testament to announce the birth of John the Baptist. Appears in the New Testament to announce the birth of Christ to Mary. Appears in the Quran to give revelations to the prophet Muhammad. Etymology of Gabriel in Hebrew is Gever, meaning man, and El, God, meaning man of God, later translated by St. Bernard in his work The Four Homilies to mean the strength of God. And it was St. Bernard who was instrumental in the creation of the Templar Credo and the order's rules and regulations. Mormons believe Gabriel was Noah once as a mortal. Gabriel is often seen depicted with a trumpet. The first instance of this is from the hymn for protection in the night, attributed to Armenian Saint Nerses IV in the 1100s. And the Muslims believe Gabriel is also a warrior assisting the Prophet Muhammad during battles. The last archangel we will look at is Uriel, the light of God. To the north, Uriel. Eastern Orthodox and folk Catholicism consider him the fourth archangel. He is known as the master of knowledge and wisdom. In the Apocryphon of John is with Michael to control the demons or archons. The other name for the demons is the archons, who help Yaldabaoth create Adam. The book of Enoch mentions him in several places and testifies on man's behalf and was Enoch's guide, so another beneficial archangel to mankind. Gnostics refer to him as Phanuel. Hermeticists will sometimes spell his name Oriel with an A. The third angel is listed in the Testament of Solomon, which is a book. The Testament of Solomon is an ancient Hebrew text that first describes Solomon building his temple using bound demons via a ring given to him by the archangel Michael, or Michael. Appears in the second book of Esdras to instruct the prophet Ezra. In apocryphal texts, Uriel helps rescue John the Baptist from King Herod's massacre of babies. He is said to stand before the gate of Eden with a fiery sword, and in fact it is Uriel who allegedly stands before the abyss with a flaming sword to prevent you from crossing if you are not yet ready. In the Apocalypse of Peter, he is the angel of repentance and has no pity. He is the one that checked the doors in Egypt for lamb's blood before death walked through. He holds the key to the pit during the end times. He is an archangel patron over the arts and sciences. And in the hierarchy of blessed angels of 1635, he's said to be the angel of earth, but is listed in the south, with Michael being east, Raphael in the west, and Gabriel in the north. So you can see the directions aren't always uniform, but we have Uriel in the north, which is what is considered today what we associate the earth element to be. He is an angel of the four winds in the Sefer Raziel, the hidden book of Raziel, the book of secrets and miseries, naming him Uziel or Uziel. This book is said to be handed down from the angels to Metatron, who gave it to Adam after his expulsion from the Garden of Eden. There was a medieval grimoire called the Sefer Raziel, which was given to students of the Qabalah who had ascended to a certain level. There is a modern version of this. I don't know what its connection is with the medieval grimoire. I know that it is a mind bender if you try to go through it. I own it in my library, and it's pretty deep. And last, the Bogomil Gnostics were said to invoke Uriel. All right, so that's the four archangels. That's the history of the four archangels. Again, know what you're invoking. Have an idea of the things that you're doing. Don't just blindly do them. Now we're moving in towards the end of this course, of this particular section. We're going to look at the Qaballistic Cross and the LBRP's origins. The LBRP was made popular by the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. The Qaballistic Cross was influenced by the work of Eliphas Levi. It was customary in Judaism to invoke the four elemental archangels after one recites the Shema before going to bed. Michael was on the right, Gabriel on the left, Uriel before you, and Raphael behind you. This is referred to in the work, I'm not going to pronounce that, and is called Binding the Chariot. The cardinal directions of the archangels likely come from Mathers and the Golden Dawn, translating the Key of Solomon, and included in the east was Al, to the west was Yah, to the south was Ata Gibor Liolam Adonai, which is what Agla stands for, and to the north, Adonai. Invoking the four angels can be found in various forms as far back as early Hebrew exorcism rites. And another important thing to note, the original cipher manuscript, of which the Golden Dawn allegedly got their powers and authority from, did not possess this, which indicates that the LBRP was created after the creation of the cipher manuscript, which appeared, if I recall my dates correctly, the guy who wrote the cipher manuscript wrote this in the 1850s. Golden Dawn appeared in 1888 or 1889. Now, how to perform the LBRP. Again, I'm not going to perform this for you. I'm going to go over real quick the instructions, and I'm going to provide a link on this video to what I consider the best version of the LBRP for you to study. You can use an implement such as a banishing dagger. The Golden Dawn has what's called the double rod, which is a dowel. It's painted black on one end, white on the other. Or you can just use your finger. I have a banishing dagger that I like to use. We've already talked about doing the ritual versus doing it in your head. I'm strongly against doing it in your head until you're at a point where you can actually do that. The ritual helps focus your mind till your mind's been properly focused and you've achieved a level of adeptship. I would advise against that. That's just my personal opinion, though. You'll face the east. You'll trace the banishing pentagram as I showed you, visualizing the blue-white fire, feeling the heat from it. In the center of that pentagram, you will visualize either the Hebrew word Yad-He-Vav-He, which is the Hebrew name of God, or the unspeakable name of God, which is why we're saying it's letters and not the actual name. And you will, you can also use like since it's Earth, you can use like an Earth zodiac sign. You can use the alchemical triangle of Earth, which is the downward triangle with a line through it. It's whatever you want. You're gonna imagine that, and then you're gonna do what's called the sign of the enter, which is you're gonna have your hands up like this with your fingers pointed out, and I have the dagger in my right hand, and you're gonna step forward and push through it, that center, and that's what's called activating the pentagram. And when you do that in the east, you're gonna vibrate Yad-He-Vav-He. Then you're going to stand and do what's called the position of silence. And then you're going to draw the line to the south, to your right, because you're facing east. You're going to do the exact same everything I'm saying here, except the names are different. So in the south, you're going to activate the pentagram with the name Adonai. So you're going to vibrate. Adonai. You're going to move to the west. You're going to invoke Ehehye. And then you're going to go to the north, and you're going to invoke Agla, which is what's called Notericon for Ata Gibor Liolam Adonai, which are various names of God. Next, you're going to invoke the archangels. You'll return to the east. You'll stretch. You'll look like this pose right here. You're going to then say, before me, Raphael. And anytime these are in all caps, this is for you to vibrate. You're going to say, Raphael. Behind me, Gabriel. To my right, Michael. To my left, Uriel. Every time you invoke one, you're going to feel their presence emerge into your presence. Upon finishing the invocation, you're going to say, for about me flames the pentagram, and within me shines the six-rayed star. And you're going to visualize the six-rayed star bursting forth from the center of your chest. When you complete this, you should feel the negativity, the gross material dissolve off of you, and meditate for a moment, and then perform the Qaballistic Cross once again to finish the ritual. And to summarize and last, the study aids for this, the Tree of Souls here is a very thick book, but this goes over all of Judaic mythology, goes over a lot of those books that I mentioned in this long lecture, their contents. So this is a good book to go over if you want to know everything there is to know about all the hidden mysteries of the Judaic faith. And this is the video I'm gonna link to. She does an amazing job at this. And so your job is to watch this and to begin practicing this once a day, at least once a day. That's key. That's vital. All right. So that long video, there's a lot to pack in there. There's a lot of work you have to do over the next 3 to 4 weeks. I don't expect you in 3 to 4 weeks to have mastered any of this, but you should be working towards it. When we start the third part of the workshop, some of that stuff's going to start to matter. Now, what I'm interested for you is, of course, study the Hebrew letters a little at a time, get those flashcards, start doing the LBRP. I'm interested to know your opinions on when you do the LBRP, what you think about it. We have a lot of, some of the guys here, they've gone through it. A lot of them have very positive things to say about it. I know one of our guys doesn't like it very much because he feels it's too strong, so he has his own version that he uses. A thing that John Michael Greer uses called the Sphere of Protection. But like I said, there's multiple ways to do banishment, and you don't have to do the LBRP. But everything right there, that is a good chunk of the neophyte work that you would do in like the Golden Dawn or what have you. So there's work involved. This is a workshop where we're going to do the work. Thanks for sticking around. If you have any comments, questions, etc., please be free to ask, leave them. I'm happy to get with you as soon as I can. Otherwise, stay safe. We'll see you soon. I may post other videos related to other things, but as far as this workshop, I wouldn't expect another one of these until another month or so. It gives us time to percolate. But that's all I got for now. So we'll talk to you later.